Okay, so we're going to try a little bit different format today. With the last video, I broke down some compositional techniques and kind of showed you a couple of ways that I go about making a picture. In this video, I wanted to show you a recent assignment that I had for the New York Times and kind of walk you through some of the challenges along the way and then also some of the successes while working on this project. So this is the first assignment that I've made for the New York Times that I pitched, and that it was my idea, and we went through the process of kind of planning and making it happen. And so this assignment was about the cicadas that were coming out this time of year. Now, we don't have them where I live in West Tennessee, but in Middle Tennessee, there was a huge influx of cicadas. And so I really wanted to photograph them, but in a slightly different way, in a more dynamic way. Recently, well, I guess the last several years, I've been working with using an off-camera flash, handheld, and using really high sync speed in order to kind of separate the thing that I'm photographing from the background. So even if it's daylight outside, I can bring down the exposure of the ambient light and just illuminate the thing that I want to illuminate. What I didn't foresee is the challenge that it would be to actually photograph something so small that moves a lot as well. So I'll kind of walk you through how this assignment went. There was a lot of failures at first, and so let's just kind of get into it. So before every assignment, I do as much research as possible. I try to find some locations in which, I would have the highest probability of success. In this particular situation, I went to a few parks in Nashville to start out, and so in the first spot, I remember driving in, and the cicadas were so loud that I thought, this is going to be so easy. They're going to be everywhere. And this is kind of what I started off finding is a lot of holes in the ground and no cicadas to be found. And so if you don't know, a cicada actually lives as a larva underground for 13 years, some 17 years. And then after 13 years, they spring up, they shed their exoskeleton, they kind of have their wings under there, they fly around, they make lots of noise, they mate, they lay eggs, and they die within a very short window of time. And so if you see these holes in the ground, then you'll know, there's cicadas in the area, but usually you can hear them at this point. So as I kind of walked through this park, I was having a really hard time finding cicadas. Even though I could hear them, I couldn't see them. And, if you can't see them, you can't photograph them. And so I caught this guy flying off a bridge. This photo didn't run at all, I think because of how small the cicada is. But as I kind of dug deeper and deeper, I found a couple of spots where they were kind of hiding in some greenery. And so if you can see here, this is kind of the example of using the flash. I've got a flash in one hand, my camera in the other, shooting at a very high sync speed so that I can just illuminate this portion of the frame and let the background go completely black. Here's another. I'm using the same lighting technique for everything, still handheld flash. And it allows you, especially if you're shooting in a shadowy area, to, put the light on the thing you want people to look at. So here's the shell of a cicada. Once it molts this shell, then it goes on to be the cicada that we think of with wings that fly around and make loud noises. Here's another shot of the shell. Now, when you're in the field making work, I like to have an idea of how I'm going to go about photographing things, but you also have to be flexible and look at the situation. So I was photographing this shell with a flash, and I could see the transparency of the shell, and so I turned my flash off and used a brighter area in the background to try to make a silhouette and also kind of see a little bit of the transparency of the shell. Here's another kind of start looking for, the light shooting through the shell in order to kind of see the different textures and things like that of the actual, form of the shell. So, you always go in with a plan. You have to have a plan, but you also have to be willing to completely throw the plan away. Now, I didn't completely throw the plan away, but especially the first part of this, I'm experimenting with a lot of things to see what's going to work and what's not going to work. Because you can see the way that the flash renders the shells is very, very different than, having the sun backlight and go through the shells. So again, I'm experimenting with each thing. You have to say yes when you're there, and you've got to try a lot of different things because you don't really know what's going to work until you get down to the edit. Still more shooting through shells. I actually made some video for this as well, and shot smaller or shorter like vignettes, almost like a cinematograph or a motion photo. And that's the first time I've done that in the field as well, for especially like a publisher like the Times. I've done a lot of video production in the background. My undergraduate work is in video production. So, it's an interesting challenge to have to do both at the same time, but it's also a challenge because you have to have, you have to have a tripod with you. You have to have all these other accessories, microphones, all these other things. And so I was carrying 2 camera bodies, maybe 3, but one I had set up to make pictures and one I had set up to shoot video. One was on a tripod. So I was just carrying around a lot of extra things. When you're chasing these little bugs flying through the air, it becomes really challenging. So, it definitely was frustrating at times trying to juggle all this equipment to get this. But, hopefully some of the footage that came out is nice. Now, throughout the day, I was really struggling. The first park I went to, people were not interacting with the cicadas at all. Nobody seemed to care less that they were there. And really, what I'm looking for is that human interaction. I'm looking for how people, how these creatures impact our lives too. And it was just completely striking out, and I was really discouraged. So I left the first or second park that I'd gone to, and I had an app on my phone that actually tracked where cicadas were coming out. And one heavy area was in Mount Pleasant, Tennessee, which is like an hour or more from Nashville. So I jumped in my truck, headed to Mount Pleasant, just hoping that I could find something. And as I was driving through this neighborhood, I looked over and there was an older gentleman there with these 2, or there's actually 3 sisters there that were all huddled around a tree. And I knew what they were doing. So I pulled over and jumped out and introduced myself and asked them if it'd be okay if I photographed them for a little while. And they were incredible, like super sweet folks. Like the dad was on the back porch, like grilling out for the weekend. Really, really hospitable people. And this, it's one of the best parts of doing this kind of work is you meet some really, really cool people along the way that you just never, it was complete random occurrence. And so it was fun because, these 3 sisters, 2 of the sisters are twins, were, picking up the shells and picking up the cicadas, and this other gentleman who is a neighbor and kind of like family member was explaining the life cycle of the cicada and how they live underground for so long, and come out and kind of teaching them about, about these creatures and the lives of these creatures, and how a lot of people assume that they're like locusts, that they fly in, but that's not true. They're underground the whole time. And it was really neat to watch him teach them about these creatures, which is something that I was trying to do as well, making photos and making a story about it. So that was really a treat. So I hung out there for a little while. You'll see at the base of trees where a lot of them are shedding their shells. You'll see a lot of leftover shells and things. And he was kind of talking about that and talking about the life cycles, which was really neat. And then, one of the kids put one of the cicadas on my arm while I was making pictures, which was, you're a part of the story whether you like it or not. So that little instance encouraged me a lot that, hey, this story's possibly going to work. And, there's something here, but it still needs a lot of work. So I got these photos in, I drove back home, which is still like a 2-hour drive. Started looking at them on my computer and trying to see, is this enough? And so later on in the week, I met with several of the editors at the New York Times, and we looked over the photos and we kind of talked a little bit more about kind of some goals of what they thought, would make the story a little stronger, the images that were working, the things that weren't working. And, that was one of the first times that I've shot some work and then met with them again and then got a chance to go back out and make more work. Because typically, like, they call me, I have an assignment to fulfill, I fulfill the assignment, I turn it in, job's over, job's done. So I kind of appreciated being able to share the work with the editors and them, giving me some advice and some feedback of what they think would make it stronger. And so that led to going back out again, driving back to Nashville, and trying a few new locations. And this is my cat Jasper. He caught the one cicada that I saw at my house. He caught it. Several days later, I went back to a park in Nashville that I knew had more sightings, and I'd reached out to other people in Nashville that were on social media that had photographed some of the cicadas and had some spots that they had seen. There's several different kind of nature enthusiast social media accounts in Nashville that had some tips and things for me to utilize to find more cicadas. So I went to another park and found a ton of cicadas there, mostly just like right at the entrance of the park. And so that was nice to feel like, okay, now I'm really getting some variety here, and just a lot more cicadas to work with. But still, it's a challenge to photograph something that small and give it a sense of scale, because a cicada is not very big, like maybe the size of like one of my, like to my first knuckle joint. Like they're just very small creatures. And I don't photograph like macro. I don't use macro lenses. Like I don't photograph small things very often. I'm usually photographing people. And it's just a whole different experience when you're photographing something so small. So these pictures were fine. Still a lot of experimenting and walking around and trying to find a compelling frame, but not also, a picture like this just kind of looks like a typical National Geographic nature photo, which to me is like kind of boring. But you have to make the photos and try and see if something comes out. That's my hand. I was thinking about that back illumination thing that I was doing with the sun, with the shells, the previous time I was out making pictures. And so I had a cicada on me that was like on my shirt. And so I put down my flash on the ground, just like standing in the middle of this path, and, held it in my hand and then shot. Let's see, this is my left. Which hand is that? I guess that's I don't know which hand it is, but I was trying to photograph them on my hand to try to give a sense of scale. Because at this park, nobody was interacting with the cicadas either. So I kind of ran into the same situation where people were kind of avoiding them, and not even noticing that they were there. Here's two cicadas together. You can guess what they're doing. Still more, like looking for these, trying to just make a composition, using light to illuminate what I want to illuminate and hide what I don't want people to see. So as I'm leaving this park, I still don't have quite the density that I really wanted, like just the sheer density of cicadas. There's a lot, but they're not quite it's hard to visualize how dense, how many of them there are. And so I ran into this lady that was like jogging or something. She asked me what I was doing, and I told her, and she was like, oh, well, I jog over, near this school, just across town, and you should check it out. Like there's several trees that are completely covered. So again, another one of those last ditch kind of like, I'm hoping this person's telling me the truth. I'm hoping that this is good information. So as I'm leaving, I jump in the truck and I drive to the school, and like, sure enough, driving down the street and like from the street, I can see trees that are completely covered in cicadas. And what I, figured out, which is, I probably should know this at this point, is that the cicadas, they're feeding on tree sap and on the newest growth of the trees. So they're mostly looking for young trees, like tree saplings, and the very tops of larger trees. So in the first day I was making pictures, I couldn't find any because they're at the very, very tip tops of trees to eat like the new growth. I didn't know that. But here in Nashville, like in this part of Nashville, these are freshly planted or, like younger trees. And so the cicadas were just eating them up, like so much so that there was actually sap spraying off of the tree onto me whenever I was trying to photograph these things. And it was crazy because they were everywhere. And I think a lot of people were scared because there's so many, but they will not hurt you. Like a cicada can't hurt you. The most they can do is run into you, maybe if you were yawning and fly into your mouth or something, but they don't bite or anything like that. So I had them all over me. It was totally fine. But it was kind of incredible to see just the sheer number of cicadas like on these trees. And once I found those several batches of trees, I kind of like knew that was the last element that I really needed to make the story work. So, okay, second day of shooting, I get all the photos in, I kind of make an edit. What I've shown you is kind of a broad edit of what I sent to the editor so that we could kind of look at a couple options. I sent them some video files as well. And so, I was hoping, this is going to be an online piece. This will be great. They chose a writer to go along with it, which was cool because usually the writer's already been selected and the photographer is meant to just kind of illustrate what the writer's writing about. And this is the first time for me, at least, to where like I'm making the pictures and they're looking at the pictures and deciding who would be a good writer for it. And so I was really, really fortunate to work with a great writer that I think like we had, even though we didn't talk about the assignment, we were really on the same wavelength. And that's just a testament to how good the photo editors and the other editors are at the New York Times. They're at the top of their game. So what I didn't know until like almost publish date is that it was going to be published and printed in the paper. I thought it was just going to be an online piece because I was doing video and everything. And they're like, no, it's going to run in the paper. The editor that I was working with, Jessie, she was like, yeah, it's going to run in the paper on a Sunday. And I was like, Sunday paper? There's like, to me, no greater achievement for the New York Times than to have your stuff printed in the Sunday paper. So I thought maybe one picture, whatever. So I have a copy of the paper here. It is I'll show you in a second. If we go over to the opinion section, Sunday opinion, right here. The back side, I got an entire page of the work. So that was a huge surprise, is to have, the pictures, this many pictures, not only in the Times, in the printed paper, but a Sunday edition of the paper, and it to be like a whole sheet. The only problem is our cat, Jasper, that you saw earlier, decided that he was going to chew up this part of the paper. Not anymore, like none of the other sections of the paper are chewed up. He just managed to find the one section that I really wanted to keep and chew it up. So, you gotta love your creatures. So anyway, there you go. That was a huge happy surprise that I got that much space to show my photos in the New York Times. And, I'm super grateful to work with fantastic editors that, that will listen to my ideas and that'll let me pitch stories. And I've pitched stories in the past and they haven't worked. That's just kind of part of the process. Not everyone is going to be a good fit for what's going on, what's in the stories that are running that week anyway. It's very much, you have to hit it just right. It has to be the right timing, a compelling story, and the right time to do the story. So I guess it all worked out. So if you want to look back, that copy of the paper ran May 26th, 2024. And if you have questions about that process, I do my best to answer them. I definitely am fortunate that they reach out to me for assignments, and that's been a good relationship over the years, and I hope it continues on for more work. But if you have questions about working for the New York Times, I'll do my best to answer them. If not, thanks for watching, and hope that was helpful.